going to see if we can get this to work. Apparently YouTube has allowed a live video feature using the webcam, which is going to be helpful because my cell phone likes to pixelate on me unless I'm using my data, and that runs out quick. So what we're working on here is the 3D Flier mobile for the ferry, brand new, exclusive. I've drawn it and I've got it almost ready to assemble. So I'm going to show you how to do the wire work for the wings. I don't know if you can see the little curly cues here. Hang on, I'll get the other one. So these little curly cues here, you see that? This is an issue. Some people haven't managed to figure it out. Some are new and would like to learn. Well, let's do it together, okay? So as you can see, I've already hinged at this one. So I have to do the matching wing. Okay, so you want to take a drill. This is the easiest way to get twisted or braided wire. You want to take a drill and some 24 gauged galvanized stainless steel wire. Get it at your hardware store. It's not very expensive and you get a lot of it. You can also buy it very cheaply at the dollar store in these little rings. You get about 3 rings. So unroll a lot more than you think you need because you have to double it. And put the ends in together and stick it in the end of your drill. If you have an assistant, makes life easier to hold it in there while you tighten the chuck. Now just get a normal cup hook and put it in the wall. You can't see the one I've got, and you can start to twist it. Another way to do it is to use normal everyday pliers. So what you would want to do is, sorry, my cat's talking. You want to work out any of the kinks in the wire and find the center. And just hold it with a pair of pliers. And then push the trigger on your drill. Done. Okay, so undo the chuck and pull your wire out. You now have a length of twisted wire. Don't worry if you make too much because you're always going to need this. So I like to cut off the bottom inch or two because that's where it gets super twisted. Now this is really easy. A lot of people ask how to get the curly cues. I have just small pliers and I put the end in flush with the top, about 1 inch, and roll it. They're never going to be exact unless you use some sort of a jig, so don't worry about it. handmade is not precise. So you just want to roll it like that, and you have a curlicue. So being that I have one done already, I'm going to measure what I need before I cut it. And you want to apply some flux to the end and make sure that you're matching the way the curlicues go. You don't want it to go backwards. And I like to overlap a little bit. I'm just going to marry this to the seam. And there goes my phone and the computer all at the same time. Of course. Get a little bit of solder on your iron. It just helps it to flow a little easier, faster. And just tack that right there. Now the wire does get hot. It's a heat transfer. So you don't want to hold on to the bare wire too long. And it's okay to have little dots where your solder meets the wire and the foil. Now, if you choose to download this pattern, you can find it on my website, which is inspirationsgg.com. You'll find it under the 3D section and a few more too. Now see, that one went a little wonky, so I'm just going to fix it. When you're happy with it, you can measure again. My computer is showing me no viewers at this time. Well, that's okay. People find it later. I should tell you that today is September 19th is Wednesday. And only because of all the videos that I do, it doesn't matter how old they are, sometimes a year goes by and people will ask me questions thinking that I'm live at that moment. If I see your questions in the chat or the comment section, then I will answer you, so don't fear. Well, this one's going to get a little warm on me. So Wirework does a few things. Hey, viewer. The Wirework will add some detail, dress up a piece that you previously thought was boring, or add a little extra to the piece for detail. And if you cross hinge joints, then it'll add strength to your piece. And I know somebody is going to ask what a hinge joint is. That's where parallel pieces are too straight and allow a hinge action. So again, just flush to the end, about an inch in on these little pliers, and just start wrapping around. Fix it if you don't like it. Measure to the other side. It's always easier doing the first one. And then give it a little snip. So notice how I lay it there and then flip it over. That's going to get me an approximate location to the other one, so it looks uniform. Now, understand that these are going to be a distance apart from each other, so it's not that big of a deal. And this one goes down there. I'm hiding the ends in my corners. I just thought of it. I sincerely hope that YouTube is going to allow this live video to sit there for later. So go ahead and join solder right to the foil on the edges. It'll stay there. There's the top 3 done. I've only got 4 more to do. So I'm going to lay it there, and then I'm going to flip it over so it runs the same direction. And I want to run that right into my other one. Watch your fingers, these get hot. Hold that down for a second so that it cools. And if you have a sponge handy, just dab it with a wet sponge. That will cool it off real quick. Okay. So that one's a little ovalish and a little tight for this next one. So I'm just going to open it up. Measure it. And cut. Now don't throw this little bit away. That's the part that we held with the pliers. This here is great for later when you want to bury that into the seam of a sun catcher. So this one's going to go right there.
Now, if you have a hard time getting your points to stay pointy on your glass, I have a video for how to cut those. But if you're working on this fairy and you become frustrated with doing those points, don't worry so much, because you can use these curlicues wherever you need to hide one of those points that might be missing. So just 2 more here. Fix it if you don't like it. Open it up a little bit. And the last one. The last one's actually going to hang out a little bit here. So after this, I'm going to put my jump rings on and show you how to attach the U-shaped wires that I use for the hinge. A little bit better, a little easier than my earlier assembly instructions where I use jump rings and leave them open. And now I'm going to get company. Okay, so this is going to stick out just a wee bit. And I'm going to go across from the points all the way to the end here. just let most of the wires stay right on top of your other solder. There's no need to bury it all. Where does this go? Along the bottom, around the corner. So you'll notice that I'm pretty much only joining on existing seams. And if I make a hole, then I just add a little bit more solder just to get my round back. That's one of those ones I want to cool down because I don't want it to pop off when I bend this backwards a little bit. And now I'll do the corner. So there's the wire work done for the Flier. And I'm going to get 4 jump rings. Now, if you get one of my patterns and you've never had a hinge kit before, I do sell them, and they include both written instructions, because all the 3D Fliers pretty much assemble the same way, as well as all the materials that you need. So they're already pre-measured and pre-cut for you. So my join of the 2 ends is right there. And I'm going to hold this on the opposite end directly across, because I want to bury that join in my solder lines. So I'm going to attach the 2 rings here that the wires will be hooked to. So make sure those are the same. You cannot vary those. So I'm going the 2nd and 3rd purple, 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to go right in the joint between them. You want to melt the seam and then pop that ring right down to the glass. Bring your solder up on the sides of the ring. And that'll hold it in. And my other one is just about right there. Okay, so that wing is essentially done. Now, I had mentioned about the horseshoes. These are exaggerated horseshoes that I use. Basically, what I do is wrap the wire with one the same size. Wrap the wire around the end of a paintbrush, fold it over, and make it about 1.5 inches long. You can always trim the ends. So these now go here, and that's what's going to attach to the rings that are on the ferry itself and allow this free movement of hinge. I do the top side first. And I usually have a block. This is just a wooden block. My brother was actually burning them in his fire pit, and I shanghaied a couple. So you want to make that more the width of the glass. You don't want to push down on the glass later to get that to meet. And my little pliers, I just bend this over a little bit because this one end right here, the line is curved, so I want this end to be straight. I'm going to hold that with the pliers at the bend that I just put in, because it's going to get really hot. I want to sink this right down in the seam. If you bury it in the seam, it looks better and it holds better. So this one can go straight. So again, I'm going to shrink the distance that it's open. Hold it flush to the end. And match where I'm going here, which is in this big joint. Flux it really well. You don't want to play around too much, because this is where you're going to break your glass if you hold the heat too long. And trust me, they're not fun to fix once you have all the wire hardware on it. See how that pops out? That's just simply because I didn't let it cool enough. There. Okay, so that wing, other than being washed, is finished. You're going to see me do this a little bit backwards because I want to get I'm just using a baby wipe just to wipe most of the flux off. Okay, so on the pattern, you'll notice that I have X's. Those X's are where I'm going to put the jump rings so that they hinge. You want to make sure they're the same on both sides. So do yourself a little favor. Marker does come off. This is permanent marker, but it's not permanent on glass. So there's one, and here's the other. Now, you don't want to put any pressure here. So just raise your piece up so it stays flat. You don't want to break it. Under all of your stuff, find your other two rings. And the exact same process. Put the part that joins at the bottom. And this is a good one for those people that ask about soldering through patina and wax. I'm going to tell you, no problem. Now I'm going to show you. Heat it up, poke that in there, and set it. Once I wipe the flux off later, then I'll be able to repatina my joints. And as you make these, we'll probably have to do it today anyway. Sometimes you have to move the rings on the wings to get the Flier to work properly. I've been moving into wider and larger, but I've found, oh, see now, overheat it. It's usually 3.5 inches from the bottom in, and then 4 inches towards the top in from the outside edge. Has become a pretty standard safe distance for the rings so that it flies. See that marker come right off. This is just a normal baby wipe. Okay, so those horseshoe clamps that I put there, are going to now go into those rings. So I'm going to do the crooked one first, and then trick your eyes into knowing where the other one is. And give it a hook, just like that. And my cat is playing with something. Okay, if it doesn't want to sit exactly right the first time, you may have your end not positioned properly. So you're going to want to hold this down. Remember, heat travels along wire, so you don't want to be playing around too much here. Let it cool. As it cools, it will turn matte instead of shiny. Make sure that end is buried right in the solder. You don't want that to stick up. It can cut somebody. If you haven't got it flat enough and you can get a pair of pliers in there, make sure you're only on the wire, not the glass, when you pinch it, because you don't want to stress crack. There we go. I remember once not watching what I was doing enough and actually soldering the hinges themselves together. That was not fun. Which is exactly what just happened because that piece fell over. So I'm just going to heat that off. Easier said than done. There we go. There we go. So that is the 3D flyer. So from here comes the tricky part of getting the dowel long enough. So my dowel will go about there, and this is a foot long. Get that drill again. And hope the cat didn't take off with your very tiny drill bit. Aha. Very, very tiny. Just like a pilot hole size. I like to use a vise to hold the dowel. And little trick, you can use a pencil and your leftover wire. This is just going to find the center for me. Hi, Meow. Hi. And you want to go in from the ends an inch. Now right on the center point there, start slow because it will slip. There's that. Now, I use jewelry wire, which is 7-strand bead along. It's very, very thin. It's 0.46 millimeters. If you don't have good eyes, this is not going to be funny. You want to put the ring on, the crimp bead, feed it through this hole, back up through that little bead, and if you saw my dragonfly, you'll know what happened there. I was going to double crimp it and I didn't, and it fell. So what I'm going to do right here is fold that back down, and then feed it from the underside of that ring again. Hold on to that end and pull your long one to tighten it. You're gonna have to play with it. It's finicky. So essentially, I've tied a little bit of a knot. So these are crimp pliers, and I'm going to crimp that bead right down on top of those wires. Now do the other side. Put the crimp bead on. Make sure you're going down through the same side with the wires so that you're not wrapped over on the other side. You'll get frustrated. It's okay to be frustrated. Just going to move her out of my way so I don't smush her. And then back up through the bottom. See that little ring? I don't want this ring of wire there. And then give it a crimp. Real good. So what you've done is created the hanger. So set that aside for a second. Now this, I usually use a foot. Instead, because the wing is bigger, I'm going to use my rod here because it is a foot. Again, I will pre-cut all of this for you if you want to get the kit from the website. You know what? I'm going to let that hang down the whole foot. Now use the one that you measured out already. Butt up those ends. And this will give you the whole measurement again. Set that aside. We won't need it for a few minutes. We're almost done. So in that same exact hole, now with your ends down the other way, make them even. Remember, you want those ones that we just put on to go to the wing. So it'll end up going like this. What I do is string both sides at the same time so that I know for a fact that I've got the wires going in the right way. Okay. So this will end up being up here. So you're going to grab a crimp ring. And when I make these kits for you, I add a couple extra of the crimp rings because they love to go flying out of your hands. You want to put that crimp ring on there, run it through the ring, and back up again into the crimp ring. Leave yourself a tail about 1/4 of an inch and about the same on your loop. Give it a crimp. Then give it another crimp. I'm Exactly what I said I didn't want to do has happened. So this is what I mean about making mistakes and how easy it is. My one end is over on this side and the other one's over on this side. And neither one are long enough to pop over. I'm going to put the crimp ring on and do the other top jump ring. Move my hanger up to the top. And do the bottom one. The other side. I cannot see the ring. I know, neither can you, right? Okay, now, don't forget, this wasn't attached. So keeping that in the right spot. Now, these, I'm going to move these because they're not high enough to allow this to lay down. But you get the idea. Once I get the wings in the right spot, then I'm going to attach a jump ring for her weight and attach using the same with the crimp rings for the weight to hang. So if I move this ring out, then the wings will actually fold up higher. I don't want that. I want them down lower towards the center here. And that will allow the wings to open flatter. It allows them to fly better. So you don't want to burn your wire. You have to play a little game here. Hold it with your wire and grab that jump ring at the same time. Just fix up your join. I'm going to move it. Let's see. I'm going to move it down here. See how that works. Don't get frustrated if you've moved these 3 or 4 times. It's okay. It's worth it in the end. So that's on the 3rd purple. So that goes right there. Now give her a test again. Much better. So the 2nd green, up there where it meets the purple. If you have enough flux on a patinaed piece and it still doesn't want to start to melt for you, then just put a little bit more solder on your tip and it will heat right through and meet the rest of the solder. Test again. So I got the wire crossed here. There we go. I'm going to take that right off for a second, just because it's in my way. So now she looks like a bat. Might have to play with those a little bit, but for the sake of time, I am going to join the bottom. So I'm going to lay her closed here, and I believe that I want her weight to come here from the belly. So I'm going to use another horseshoe hook. And I'm going to bend it over again. So that it hangs straight after I attach it to this line. Bury that right in that seam. Oh. And of course, it's superheated, so it just bled right through to the other side. That's okay. So make sure that's flattened. You want to stay on the wire, not the glass part of that sticking up because of the blob that just went through. So I'm going to help it a little bit by holding it until the solder cools. Hold it down and get the rest joined up. There we go. So that's her jump ring there. You want to add your ring to your weight. Ouch. Don't stick your finger on your fresh solder. Now you want to go with about 6 to 8 inches. For the weight. And you're back to playing with crimp rings. Pardon me. Okay, so crimp ring on the wire. Run it through. And back up. I like to run these ones around twice because people pull on the weight a lot. And the crimp rings only holds so much force. Okay, other end onto here. I think the worst of, I was at a very upscale art event, and a little girl wanted really bad to pull the weight on my blue jay, and when she did, the weight came right off. She pulled hard, but I didn't say much. It was an easy fix. Okay. So make sure that your wires are not caught up in any of your loops. Hold that up. And you can't see it. Hang on, I'll turn the camera up a little bit. See, not enough. There's too much recoil down, so I'm going to move those rings again and make her fly. But there you go. There is the stained glass world's first flying fairy. Well, thank you for watching, and look for her real soon. Bye for now.